Welcome again to Learning Lab Live. For those of you that have been before, welcome back. For those of you that are new, welcome. So just kind of noting what Learning Lab Live is, just for those that you can know, is it's an opportunity for us to kind of talk about our products specifically. Here at ELB, we have a lot of different options to help people, kind of progress their workforce forward. But we're really focused on our products during these sessions, and so we pick a different one each month to kind of go over some different specific topics and tips and tricks. And I also try to be a bit more interactive in these sessions. So I will be asking you some questions as we go through the sessions and the session today. Some of those you'll be responding to via polls on screen. Some of those I'll actually ask you to use the chat panel to join in the discussion. So now let's take a minute here and talk about VR, so virtual reality training. This actually could probably go pretty broad across any sort of extended reality type training that you have. But in the chat, I'm curious to know, what do you think makes VR such a powerful method for training? Uh, so if you want to just throw in your comments there in the chat, this could be, you know, from your own experience. This could be things that you've heard. Like, feel free to kind of pipe in there. I'll give you guys a second. You feel you are there and have to react. That's perfect. Yeah. It's a safe space to make mistakes trying to a new tool or technique. Absolutely. In our case, we can make scenarios you can't recreate in real life, like a fire. Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Um, Great for scenarios in the actual workplace. Yes. Yeah, these are all great. Yeah, exactly. Like it gives you a way to simulate. Like I try to, when I'm talking to customers about this, I always say that it's like anything that might involve some sort of risk. And that can be risk to uh, oh, um, it can be tangible and can be tangible in simulation. That's great too. Both video and audio learning, which engages the brain, helps recall. Great. I think like it's anything that's like you're simulating anything that can require some sort of risk to happen, and it's a great way to replace that risk with something that gives you that hands-on training, that ability to interact with things, that ability to feel like you're there in the moment without actually putting people in danger or putting equipment at risk or product at risk, whatever it might be. And as someone mentioned here too, it's like you can simulate things that could happen, but are very dangerous when they do. Like for instance, that fire that was just was mentioned earlier on here. Like that's a really powerful one because like you want to know how to react when that happens. You hope it never happens. Like that's one of those trainings when you take it and hope that you never actually have to do it. But the fact that you're able to condition that response and get that in there, that's a perfect example of having that in there. Now, I think we kind of talked about this just a second ago, but what skills do we feel are good to train in VR? I think a lot of those comments leaned into that as well. But here's the other question: is why don't we use it to train more often? Because VR is still very much a very almost specific, almost niche type use case, uh, and um, we don't see it as much. So, like, if you have comments about that, feel free to throw that in the chat of like why we don't use it as often. So I think there are some like natural barriers to it that we'll discuss here in just a second, but um, lack of imagination, that's a good one. Lack of knowledge on how to effectively integrate it into training, absolutely, that's another good one. And I'd say that's a pretty big one that I've run across with many organizations that I've talked to is they are wanting to use VR, but kind of in the wrong way, and not really knowing how to throw it in there the right way. Um, you really have to sort the narrative. Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. They don't want to spend the money. That's another big one as well, because it's, seen as expensive and time consuming to create. Absolutely. So I think really what, causes, I think there's 2 points that have already been made there that like the lack of knowledge of how to effectively integrate it. That's a big one because then that kind of leads into the don't want to spend money one. Um, yes, because it's again, it's not expensive if you're doing it right. Yes, lack of a good use case, that's also another good one. So there's kind of this idea of, okay, how do I integrate this into training? Should this be in VR? And we'll kind of talk through what should be in VR in just a little minute. But like, really, should this situation be in VR? How would we, implement this in VR? People just don't really know how to think about it because it's very challenging to kind of shift your mindset from building an e-learning, static e-learning on, in something like Lectora or Storyline or one of those other tools, and shifting that perspective and saying, okay, how do I now translate that into a VR space? Because I think a lot of you might have heard stuff from your leadership where it's like, well, we want more immersive and engaging methods. And so we want you to look at VR, but they're like, well, what's the use case? Does it really make sense? And sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it becomes a challenge in that sense. So you do have to kind of think through all of that of, okay, how do we effectively put this in here? What use case can it be used for? And what things can be trained in other ways that might be easier to adapt, those types of things. You have to think through all of that, but you really have to have the use case. So we're going to start about like, okay, where do you start? Because I think that becomes a big challenge as well is, okay, how do I get started with this if I've never done this before, like we just discussed? And really that comes down to, in my mind, a few key tenets that you really have to think about. One of those is first off, does this actually belong in VR? So we have an ebook out there. I forgot to grab the link so we could throw it in there, but we'll send that out as part of the follow-up. Um, where it's called a Room Getting Started in VR. It's from a few years ago, but it talked about, how do you make the use case? How do you like validate the use case for VR? How do you approach getting this implemented in your organization? And the first thing that that book talks about is, okay, why does this even belong in VR? Does this even belong in VR? Because we hear this a lot, and you might hear it as well. And I kind of touched on it just a moment ago, is that a lot of organizations, they want this immersivity in their training. I don't know if that's even a word, but they will kind of want that in their training, but they're not sure exactly how to get it. So they're like, oh yeah, well, we've seen VR used for training. There's all these cool simulations and things that we've already seen. These could be more video game like or something like that. But then they don't stop and think, what should I be training in VR? Like, should this be VR or should I just do this as something else? So when you're thinking about, okay, does this exercise belong in VR? Kind of think through a couple of things here. So a couple of questions you need to maybe ask yourself is, do you need any spatial awareness for this exercise? Like, do you need to be able to see the space and understand and navigate it? Uh, do you want it to be a realistic scenario? Like, do you want it to, seem as realistic as possible? Are you training on or in a prohibitively expensive equipment or settings? Like that goes back to, the risk involved, right? Like, are you training in an area where, if you break a piece of equipment, it's going to cost you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to fix that equipment? Is it a setting that you could actually like safely train someone in? Or does it require that training even before they step foot inside of that building? Those types of things. Is safety an issue? Again, going back to risk. And then the other one is travel cost an issue as well? Because think about it, like if you're trying to like show what's happening at a particular facility, you don't necessarily want to have everybody travel there. Because we actually hear from a few customers recently, actually, where they're wanting to like set up a VR scenario because they want to show their like executive staff, their people at headquarters, what it's like working in one of their plants because they don't really have that background. And so like this is VR is a really safe tool and easy tool to do that with. So you do have to kind of think through these things of, okay, does this belong in VR? Second thing, I think that is very key to this whole process before we even get into the actual process of planning is, what is your goal? Like, um, as with like any training that you're building, like what is that end goal? What is that objective? What are you trying to accomplish? And what specifically about VR will help you, what advantages will that have as you're building this course? Like, again, does this belong in VR? Is this something that you want to have in there? What is that goal? What is that objective in mind? Because if we don't start with that end goal in mind, again, as instructional designers, we all know this, is that the course, the training is not going to be effective. And so even before you start planning anything, kind of think through that process first. And you'll see that as I show you like what I use as a script, and everything. Like you'll see that there's, a very specific spot where I say, okay, here's my objective, here's my goal, and this is what we're building towards, right? As we build out this, narrative, for lack of a better term for it. Now, this last tenet that I want to kind of talk about, at least I think this is the last one before we get into the actual process, is how you think about like your mindset here. Um, oh, I actually love this comment here. So create an experience, not just a course in VR, is a great way of thinking for thinking. That is actually great. Um, the last thing I want like here's like just how you see yourself, because I think a lot of us um, kind of think like, well, this is my role, this is what I do. We don't really have our mindset shift very often in ways where we think about ourselves in different lights. So, for instance, like me, like I wear many hats here at ELB. So I'm a solutions engineer, which means I demo our products. I talk through that. I'm a consultant. I also work internally as a consultant there as well, but I also help produce content. So I'm a producer. I have all these different roles that I have that I put on in just my professional life. And then you look at, outside of my professional life, so I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a friend. You have these different roles that you're doing. And like with VR, you're kind of, in my mind at least, you're kind of taking on three separate little roles that kind of all intersect to where you're building out this VR. So first of those being you're an instructional designer. You're trying to educate typically, adults or an audience, whatever it might be, and trying to design courses for that. But you're also, in most cases, you're also a developer. You're also trying to build something, actually create the content. But with VR, you kind of add in a third component to this where you're almost like a filmmaker as well, is the way I put it. Filmmaker, you could also include like storyteller in here as well, where you have to kind of think with a different mindset because you're thinking through, again, not a flat slide, you're thinking through a 360 immersive space and experience with that. So you really have to think through what that all feels like, the emotions that you're going to have, everything there. So that's more of like a filmmaker mentality because you think of people like, I don't know, for instance, like, I don't know, James Cameron, right? Who has the Avatar movies coming out. This is not an ad for Avatar, but um, you look at like how he approaches things, the mindset that he must have as he's looking at, okay, how do I creatively, express this? You think about like a composer and how they're expressing that. And so you're kind of thinking through all these different elements because you're kind of creating in some ways this 360 in the case of like VR, you're creating this like 360 movie and things. So you do have to kind of think through those emotional beats and those story beats and things as you're going through this. Now, then that kind of all intersects to be what I'm calling a VR creator. You could use a different term there as well, but that's kind of where it all intersects for me. And so this tends to be like the harder, like kind of concept to get for people because again, you're shifting your mindset. It has nothing to do with your skill set, but it's all about, okay, how are you thinking about yourself and how are you thinking about how you're approaching this? And if you can kind of start thinking of yourself as like, and maybe you just, internally tell yourself, hey, I'm a filmmaker or I'm this, like you start thinking about these things and eventually you kind of get into that and you can take information from these different disciplines to help you inform how you're going to function here. So like, learning about how like scripting works, learning about how like filmmakers do different story beats. Because you already have the knowledge of like, okay, how instructional design principles work, right? And how the tools work as a developer. You have to bring that all together to really build effective VR scenarios. So that's kind of those tenets that you kind of have to think about before you get into even the process of planning. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm going to see if there's anything in the chat or in the questions here. Doesn't look like there is. There's some great comments going on in the chat, so I really appreciate all those participating there as well. So let's kind of talk about a very simple planning process. So this is how I think about it in these different stages. Now, some of these are a lot more fun than others. Um, And some of them are a lot, take a bit more time than others that you have to work through. But I think these all serve kind of specific cases. And so like in this case, you know, so like my process here is okay, script it out. So essentially you're describing everything and planning everything out in words, listing out your goals, your objectives, and then plan for them. So that's what you're kind of doing is, okay, this is how I'm going to structure this. This is what I'm going to do. And we'll take a look at a script here in a second. But second phase is you're going to plan visually. Now, this could be different for how you work because I found actually as I was, kind of looking, like thinking through this content, like, okay, what actually works best for me and what doesn't work in this plan visually step? Because this can be creating this could be simple as creating a flow chart, or you can even, bust it out to a full storyboard where you're seeing the whole concept visually. Now, the whole thing about like planning visually as well as scripting is these are really communication tools that you're building to communicate your ideas and what you're trying to build to either maybe a customer or another developer or even just to yourself about, okay, this is what this end experience is going to look like here. So like that's kind of your planning phases right there. And and then gathering the assets together. So be sure you have a shot list, like be sure you know what you need to capture, um, as well as what assets you need to create, because there's going to be components that you're probably going to need to capture. There's going to be things you're going to need to create. There's going to be all sorts of things you need to consider and plan for. And so you want to make sure that you have that planned out. Like if you do need to go grab, like Mark's suggesting here, like, props and things that you need to bring into the experience, plan for those things. Make sure you have all that together because the one thing with VR, because you are, again, especially with scenario VR, you are like filming something, you are capturing a scene, you are doing one of these things. It's can be challenging to go like if you miss a shot that you need, if you need to go capture something else, it can be a challenge to get back out there. I have a customer that I've been talking to right now where their facilities are spread out across the country. And so to get back to the specific, machine that they're building their scenario about, it's a challenge when one person lives on one side of the country and the other lives on the other, and the facility's in a different spot, and you're trying to capture all that. So you really have to be very conscious of that time, that effort that takes, because you can waste a lot of time and effort with that. And so you want to make sure that that's all there for you, and then that you're able to build out those assets as well. And then lastly, probably kind of the key part is building it out in CVR as well. So being able to take that plan and then make it a reality is what you're leaning towards. But let's take a look at a script template. Now, this is my example. Other people may do this differently, and that's okay. Like there's no wrong way to write out the script if it works to communicate your ideas. Same thing with like planning visually. There's no wrong way to do that as long as it works for you. So kind of keep that in mind here. Now, I just built out this very simple script. Now, this is a scenario that some of you might have seen if you've seen our demos before of like an office safety one. So I kind of take that scenario and work backwards and write the script from that. So this isn't a completely new script or anything like that. Uh, but if I was scripting this out from scratch, this is how I would kind of approach this is, okay, I want to give it some sort of description and treatment right ahead. So this is essentially a summary of what the scenario is planning to look like, feel like, do within the scenario. And then obviously I'm going to put in my goals and objectives. Now you notice I have one here. Um, VR lends itself very well to micro learning. And so you don't need to have a lot of learning objectives for a single scenario. In fact, like keeping it very objective focused to one specific outcome or a couple different outcomes is a really good way to keep that focused. And that way it makes it a lot easier for you to plan that out too, because you're only planning for that one objective. And that way that user doesn't get confused by saying, okay, there's different objectives here or whatever. Now, granted, you can do scenarios like I have seen them where people have done different, um, like built one scenario, but had like different paths to go down that have different objectives to it. So like I've seen a couple medical ones where, there's different, uh, similar discipline, but different scenarios that they're going through either for like stroke presentation or how like handle different stages, those types of things that you can throw that in there. But you do kind of want to keep that focus on a single thing there. And then you'll want to lay out, what is your scene going to talk about and what elements are going to be on those scenes. So in this case, like I give a scene description again. So this is describing the image or video I'm going to capture. And I even specifically lay out here that this is going to be, well, actually, I think I missed the word there, but this is going to be a 360-degree video. Let's go ahead and edit that right now, um, to kind of show what's going on around the scene there. And then I also state like where it connects to, right? Like, okay, here are the different scenes that it's going to get to. Now, you'll see this more when we get to the plan visually step, but this kind of gives you that idea. And then, okay, how are you going to get there? What are the details? What are the hotspots we're going to use? What audio are we going to use? Like, as you scroll down here, you'll see that, like, I look into questions and audio, text, which are what we refer to as info cards in the platform. Down here, like, what is that all going to look like? And then down here at the bottom, and I might actually put this at a different spot in the script as well. I may put this towards the beginning. Is here's my shot list and my assets that I need to capture, right? So like, okay, each of my scenes, okay, what's going to be a video? What's going to be an image? What are my assets for my hotspots? And so I have like these different hotspot images, the audio, and these all kind of connect to those things that were planned on each of those scenes. Now, the nice thing is, like, in this case, like with these assets, I'm using a lot of built-in things, but the audio I definitely need to go capture. And this lets me just kind of plan this out and say, okay, I have everything that I need to get there. So you can kind of see where these steps that I'm talking about, they can kind of mix together a bit too in the same artifacts that you're building out. But this will give you a pretty, decent idea of what's going on. Now, this could get more detailed. You could add more information in here. Again, it's just whatever works to then explain this. Like, you kind of got to look at it as you're explaining it to someone else, even if you're doing the whole process yourself. You do want to look at the fact that if I had to go and explain this to somebody else or pass this document off to someone else, how much detail do I want in there so that way they'll know exactly what the vision is, and looking at it and like again, like you're thinking through, what's the goal? What are the story beats that lead to us get to that stage as well? So you have to think through all of that process as you're building this out. And like this again is a pretty basic scenario because all you're doing is pointing out hazards in an office space, and you'll kind of see this come to life here in a little bit. But um, that's kind of what we're explaining here. Now, as we get into this plan visually step, I'm going to show you two examples here. One of those is going to be a flow chart. One of them is going to be the start of a storyboard, because I just ran out of time to get it all put together for y'all. But the flow chart for me, honestly, is the easiest way to visualize this because number one, it's really low fidelity, meaning that it's not necessarily you're getting distracted by images or videos at this point. You're getting just the basic wireframe of what this experience is going to look like. So you're seeing, okay, from start to end, what happens in this middle section here. And again, this could be a bit more detailed than this. Like this is a pretty basic one, but you could put in some more details if you'd like. But like what I'm showing here is, okay, on each of these different main scenes, which are these ones captured in yellow. Now I did color code this with this yellow outline because these are going to be my video scenes. So I also kind of started putting that in there. I'd probably want to create a key for this if I was going to pass this off to somebody else, but for what we're doing today, this works out just fine. And then these other ones are going to be video or going to be images as the scenes there. And for those of you that haven't used CVR before, we'll kind of show this here in just a moment. Um, but then these are like, okay, how are these connected? That's what these connectors are showing us. Okay, this one is connected, this back office one is connected to this back door scene, but then this back door scene is going to lead you back into the back office scene as well. So you're seeing all these different connections that are being made here as you're going through this process. And so you're just planning out, okay, how do these things all connect to each other? And again, you could put more in detail in here. You could, put in like the different like timed events that might happen through it, those types of things as well. Well, this just gives you a simple way to like look at this. Now, storyboarding, for me, I felt was not as effective, and that may be just the way my mind works. And maybe I was getting distracted by too many things, right? Where in this case, this is going to be a bit more, a little bit higher fidelity, and you can really actually kind of scale this. I did take screenshots of the actual scenario and throw that in here, but you could do just representative, images of it or doodles, whatever you want to throw in there to kind of storyboard and show the idea. Because again, it's about communicating the idea, not necessarily exactly what it looks like. But the challenge that I was running into personally is the fact that I'm trying to now translate a 360 space into a, a flat experience, right? And so um, for me, that took actually creating like three different, views of this same scene and kind of putting that together to show, okay, where's the positioning of this? Because storyboards let you you can plan out like where things are positioned a little bit better. You can still kind of keep them again a little bit lower fidelity. So like for me, like I might have been overthinking this a little bit, because like when I actually like put this together, because this is 360 and I want to kind of show that it's all the same scene, I did put in these little navigators down here so that way I could, feel like I was rotating it around. And so that way, again, so that I could explain this and then like clicking in here and then like some of this I didn't end up, fully um, wiring up for us. And I'm getting a little confused because that shows some of the CVR interface I'm used to. Um, but you get some, but you can kind of again see where you can kind of plan this visually out, lay out some of your elements. I put in the script down here in the notes. You could put it off to the side if you wanted to. But again, it kind of depends on how well, like, on how what works best for you on how you're going to explain this. So for like me personally, I would probably skip the storyboard myself. Some people that might be controversial, I don't know, but like for me, like it just feels like it's a step where it's like, well, I could just use the flowchart to kind of explain what this is going on, and then the script could kind of help explain in words for me. So there's so that might be again a little bit controversial of a take, but if the storyboard is like, no, I prefer explaining visually, then you can, right? Like you have that option. But again, I don't know that it's necessarily needed in this case to do that. And Duncan, okay, you guys don't storyboard. Okay. So maybe it's not as hot a take as I thought. It's crazy as I thought. Um, but you kind of see those different examples play out. And then obviously like capturing, like we already showed the asset list there, the shot list and asset list there, and then it's getting into building in CVR, which we'll get into in just a second. But one thing that I did want to mention here, as a lot of people are like, cool, but you're doing that in Google Docs. I've done webinars in the past where people get hung up when I'm talking about tools outside of the ELB offerings and thinking that I'm making a direct recommendation for that particular product. I am not. So kind of some tools to consider if you're trying to look for something that might help you explain a lot of these things. Script writing, it's fairly straightforward. You have Word, Google Docs, you have Pages on Mac, any sort of text editor that you want to use, you can utilize that. Script writing, again, many others out there. That's just a small list. Um, Visual planning, I ran out of room here, so I just put in some of the ones that I came up with off the top because there's, again, a number of different ways to do this. This is more specifically for like the flow charting aspect, really. So you have like, PowerPoint, Google Slides, which is what I just showed, Keynote again on Mac. You also have things like Figma, which is a UX tool that also has a collaborative like whiteboard space. And that's where those last three kind of come into play as well. Those are other whiteboarding tools that I've used personally. All these I've actually have used personally that I'm explaining here. Um, and they all kind of have different ways. So like your organization may have specific tools already that they can use and that you can just tap into. So you might just want to start there and see what's available to you and then kind of branch out. Personally, like built that flowchart twice. So I built it in the slides that you just saw, and then I actually tried it in Figma's flowcharting tool, which I think is called like FigJam, I think. And I actually found FigJam to be easier to use in building that out because it's purpose built for building these kind of user flows and things. So kind of keep that in mind as you're looking at tool sets like, okay, what's specifically there for this? What can I kind of hack together from what I have? Different things there. And then for asset creation, this is in no way an exhaustive list by any means, but obviously like 360 cameras, 2D camera as well would be fall into that as well. Um, then you have like creative applications like Adobe's Creative Cloud. You also have Affinity, which is owned by Canva. So these technically are kind of together, but it's a powerful alternative to Adobe there. And then Canva is also something I know a lot of organizations have started to use. So you might already have access to it. You can utilize it for it. It's not my personal favorite, but it's there. Then you have obviously Paint as well. It could be an option. And then a lot of things can be generated via AI now. Now, again, this goes into a whole nother topic around AI and how you can use it. But you do have the option to use like, AI audio generators, video generators, image generators, these types of things to then help build the assets that you need. So there's a lot of different things. Again, like we're not going to say like one specific tool here. Use whatever works out for you there. Keep in mind too, uh, that sound, as Duncan's actually pointed out here in the chat, is that I actually kind of missed that here a little bit, is that, the sound capturing, you know, the sound in the video as well as any sort of background sounds that you have, is also very key. So you kind of want to keep that in mind too. So let's now see how well I can, kind of execute on the plan that I have. So we're going to kind of the next, 10 minutes or so, 13 minutes, kind of walk you through how to build a scenario. But I do want to emphasize that everything that I've said so far, you'll notice that I'm kind of qualifying a lot of it by saying build, whatever works for you, whatever tools that you have. The most important thing here to remember is to build a system that's going to and process that's going to work for you on how you can plan and then execute on it. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through this next portion here. So let me go ahead and log into CenarioVR here. So kind of keep in mind as I'm building this is like I can build fairly quickly in this because I've used CVR for many years now. So I'm pretty proficient. Um, so just kind of keep that in mind as I'm doing this. Um, so again, your speed may vary a little bit as you're getting into it if this is your first time. But for those of you that haven't seen CVR before, the concept here really is to make creating these immersive VR experiences a lot more approachable for anyone to come in here and create. This isn't designed to necessarily be something where it takes a lot of time. Like it's meant to be very quick, very easy to produce, and so it's really meant for anybody. And so let me kind of show you an example of this. So like this is a more refined version of of the scripted scenario that I just talked about here. I'm building a little bit smaller version of this for us today, but this is essentially the concept. Now, this is a old scenario. This has been around, I think, since the start of Scenario VR, which was about back in like 2018 or so. Um, and so this one's been around the block a bit. But the idea here being that we're going to be navigating this office space here. So like this is kind of the functionality we'll be building is we'll be navigating to these different areas of the office, and we can see that, this is, video here. And then looking at these different hazards. And as I hit this, like you'll hear some audio playing if I've shared my sound right, you'll be able to hear this in just a second.
What is the safety violation here?
And it's asking us to ask a question here, but I do want to point out here that this one, same space, but this is an image and we're zoomed in a little bit closer. So you want to be very um, kind of mindful of where you're putting that shot, but we're not going to really talk about shot composition right now, but you can kind of see that here. And then I'm going to interact with this and just say, this one looks like the, exit door is blocked here.
Correct. The exit door is blocked. All exits must have a clear path so they can be used in case of emergency.
And now it's going to bounce me back out. And that's what this entire scenario is really doing is it's kind of this repeated process of saying, okay, click on these hazards. Why is it a hazard? Getting in there. So that's what we're going to be kind of looking at building today. So uh, I'm going to just go back out here and start building that for us. And so to create a new scenario, I'm just going to hit create scenario. Now you do have a couple of different options on how you can start your scene. So you can either upload a file, which is what I'm going to do, or multiple files as well. You can pull from like your own scene. So if you have something that you saved before, you can pull that in. You can also use our AI wizard, which I think I've done a webinar on before. I'm not going to bother you with using that today, but I will just upload my different assets here. So I do have on my desktop my assets folder here. Should go ahead and just kind of click into this. So you see that I have this kind of well organized as well. I think that's another like just kind of pro tip here is like as you gather your assets, make sure that they're organized in a way that you can find them pretty easily. And then I'll go ahead and click on my scenes here. And I'll go ahead and just kind of shift click all of these together and open them all at once. You notice that it did load all of those for me. I'll go ahead and create the scenario. So it's going to upload these and create this. You can rename your scenario right here as well. I'm just going to, leave that for the moment. Throw that in, but you can kind of see that progress. We'll let that import for us. See that there a second. So it's now imported all of our scenes. Now you notice I probably should reorder these, but luckily they're pretty clearly labeled. So I'll go ahead and drag this one up to the top. Where's my number 2? There we go. And 3, 4, let's see, 5. Let's go there. 6 and 7. Okay, there we go. So this on the left is called the scene list. And so like this just shows us our individual scenes, and then any objects that we add to it will be shown in there. So what I'm first going to do is, so this is our first scene. I'm not going to be able to get through this entire scenario. It's going to take longer than the time that we have to do so. So I'm just going to show you some of the basics here. I'm going to first start out by adding a hotspot here that we're going to call back office. We're going to go ahead and pull in a asset from our media library. So built into CVR, you do have these built-in assets that you can use. I'm going to use this right arrow here. We'll leave that visible for us. And then we're going to add an action to it. So I'm going to choose an action to link to a new scene, which is going to go to our back office. Now, with linking to a scene, you actually do have this other setting that pops up to apply scene direction to it. This just lets us make sure that when the user comes into that scene, they're going to be looking the right direction. So it's kind of keeping that immersion up. And it's like in this case, we're good to go. I'll just kind of leave it there for now. And I'll go ahead and back to properties and hit done there. And it's looking a little big there. So I'll go ahead and kind of scrunch that down a bit and put that angled towards the back office there. Now I could I'll throw in another one similar to this. I'll actually go ahead and just, copy and paste this actually and put this over to go back to our cube row here and just change out the target of this action to go to the cube row there. So hit done. So like now if I go ahead and preview this, see that, okay, we're in a 360 video. I can now go into that scene. Now I should probably put navigation to get us back out of that, but you can kind of see that that's going into our back office there. This one over here, which is it's going to navigate us into this cube row scene. So we have that ready for us there. So back to our front office, we're now going to add our first hazard to this scene here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and actually just copy one of these again here and just copy and paste it there and move it over because it's going to use the same actions for us. It saves me a couple of steps there. Now I will do some different things to this, like I will actually go into our media library and find this alert option here. So that's going to change out my asset for me. And then I'm going to go ahead and link to the front fire extinguisher, and I'll just double check again that it's pointing the right direction for me. It looks good. Hit done. Back to the properties done. So now we'll go into our second scene here and build this out here. So in this case, this is one of our hazard scenes. So we're zooming in on this. And so what we want the user to do in this is we want them to respond to a question that will play for them. So we'll go ahead and start by adding that question. So I'll go ahead and add a question here, and I'll actually pull up my text file that has all of my question text to this. This just makes it a little bit easier if you have it all in one spot here. You could pull it up from the script as well. I just kind of dumped it in here so that way I had it. I'll go ahead and just copy that and dump that text in here. And I'll actually use this as the name of the question just so that way that makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to go navigate back here and grab the text. I think one of the big advantages to putting it into a text editor like this is like you don't have any of the formatting that you have to worry about, so it comes in pretty cleanly for you. I've had issues copy and pasting from other softwares in the past. I'll go ahead and add two more choices here. Um, go ahead and select these in there. Now I'll go ahead and refer back to my script to find the correct option here. So like in this case, it's the maintenance tag is missing. So this shows you kind of the importance of putting this in there is because, yeah, I've dumped my text into a different file to copy from, but I forgot to put in or didn't put in like, okay, what's the correct answer? So I need to refer back to my script to say, the maintenance tag is missing is the correct answer there. So we'll kind of leave that as is for the moment. So it's dropping that question in for us. Now I can change the look of that if I wanted to. I can come up here and change the look and feel of it. I'm not going to worry about that just for demo purposes today. I'm going to leave that as is. Um, but what I am going to do here is I am going to add some audio to this. I'll go ahead and add audio that I'll upload from my computer. So if you look at, again, if you look back at my script here, there's an audio that says, okay, what is the safety violation here? And this is going to autoplay when the learner enters the scene. So that's the part where we're going to build right now. So I already have this set to autoplay. We'll go ahead and find my audio here. So we'll go ahead back a couple here and go into the voiceover folder and go into, okay, what is the safety violation here? So that's going to pull in. Now, the nice thing with CVR too is like once I put in this audio resource, anytime that I add audio, you'll see this, like I'll be able to pull that from a drop down. So when we repeat this process on our other questions, we can just pull it in directly here by just adding an audio clip and selecting it there. But I'll go ahead and hit done. And obviously it's audio. It's not going to appear here in the scene. Uh, we do also support what's known as spatial audio. And in that case, you would see a little kind of speaker icon that's going to be added to the scene that lets you position it. But in this case, we just want the learner to hear it. And it's going to autoplay as they enter the scene. So if I go ahead and just test that out.
What is the safety violation here?
So we have that going for us. And now we're going to get a little tricky here. I'm going to go back into this and actually, hold on. We're going to add in some additional audio clips here as well. So go ahead and upload. We'll start with our actually and correct options. So I'll actually add those in separately here. Oops, I missed something there. I don't need that to autoplay. And then I'll go ahead and add another audio. And we'll turn that autoplay off now, so don't forget to do that later. And I'll go correct. Go ahead and import those and hit done. And then lastly, I'll do one more audio clip, and that's going to be, again, not going to autoplay. That's going to be the actual feedback there. So we're going to hit done on that. So when we get into each of these options, so you notice on the questions, on the built-in questions in the CVR, you have this option to trigger actions based off of different choices. So like this is one of the real cool things with VR is you can really use this for doing a lot of different things. Like if this was a conversational scenario that you're having between two people, those different options could trigger to go to a new scene where there's a different interaction happening. You could trigger, just visual feedback to show. A lot of different options there. In our case, we are just going to use this audio that we just imported as the feedback here. So I'll go ahead and now say, in this case, as my action on this particular choice, to play the actually audio. And on correct, I'm actually going to go ahead and say, okay, play the correct audio here. So like those are my two actions that I'm going to use. But for the last two choices, I'm actually just going to come up here and copy this and just paste that on each of these here, right? And back to properties and done. So now you'll notice like if we, pick an option
What
here,
is the safety violation here? Actually,
and that's all that it says is actually, right? Because that's all that I told it to do. So how we're going to trigger this last actual feedback to show is or to play, I guess, in this case, because again, it's audio, is on each of these, so on the actually incorrect, I'm going to go ahead and say on done because you have this option to trigger an action when this is done. I'm going to go ahead and say play. Our maintenance tag is missing here. Um, and again, I'm actually going to go ahead and just copy that because I'm going to use that on the correct as well. And we're good to go there. And then on this last one, on the actual feedback, I'm going to say on done, link to scene, and go back to the front office. Now, in the original version of this scene, it doesn't, I think, position you totally correct. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of position you this way a little bit so you can kind of see how that all flows. And so we're going to go ahead and hit done there. And so now as we play this particular
What
scene,
is the safety violation here?
we'll go ahead and pick our option here.
Actually, the maintenance tag is missing. Improperly maintained fire extinguishers are the #1 source of OSHA violations today.
And then that brings us back into our scene, and you notice how it changed direction to kind of put us in the correct spot there. Now, this exact same process is used across the other three scenes, and so I'm not going to go ahead and have you sit through all of that. But that's how I would progress. And again, it's using the script as reference, using this flow chart to kind of reference, okay, where are these things connecting? And personally, too, this is another tip, and you noticed me do this during when I was working in CVR there, is I do like to kind of wire up where my navigation is going to go, like which scenes navigate to each other first. And so I'll reference this to do that typically. Again, I know this scenario very well, so I was able to kind of just do that by memory, um, but you can kind of see how that's done there. And um, so that kind of shows you that process there of taking that to say, okay, let's plan it out, let's script it out, and then let's bring that into VR. So, and the scenario VR. I know that was pretty quick on there to kind of show you that process there. Uh, but hopefully that helps you kind of get the idea of, how to think differently and get that planning done as well to be able to build those scenarios in kind of rapid succession, like I just did there. Um, it is a process. Like it does take time to kind of learn these things, shift your mindset, shift how you're thinking through things, and really think through even if the scenario that you're asking or you're building is uh, the right thing to do. Like you have to think through all these different things with it. But again, the most important thing here is that you want to build a system, process, way of thinking that works for you and that will help you kind of be repeatable. Because I think earlier on we had someone say like, "Hey, we just released our first scenario," which is fantastic. Because I have a lot of customers that they get a lot of these ideas in their head, they want to build them all out. And then you got to pull them back and say, hey, like, let's start with one and get this one launched, for you. And then we'll go from there and build and build and build. Because VR, like, once you get going with it, you can really expand it and build it, build a number of different use cases for it. And so it just kind of blows out to these different things. So it's really powerful there. So as we close up here, any questions in the Q&A, feel free to drop those in there. We have a couple minutes. I'm happy to answer a few. But just kind of noting on a wrap up here, again, feel free to connect with me if we're not on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out if there are questions that you have. Post this webinar. Happy to take some time one-on-one to chat with you, show you a bit more about Scenario VR if it's something that you're investigating for your future, your needs there. And then just a reminder about Learning Lab Live, which we are doing monthly. Apologies for those of you that maybe were trying to attend last month. We did have to cancel last minute due to unforeseen circumstances. But we've now pushed that particular session, which is about Lectora and library objects, to January. So it's going to be on January 20th. So you didn't have to wait too long for it. And so we're really excited to put that one together for you. Just kind of noting through like 2026, we are going to continue Learning Lab Live, and the goal is to kind of highlight all the new, fun things that are coming out. Can't really speak to anything new quite yet on new features and whatnot, but there are some pretty cool things in the pipeline right now that we'll be highlighting here, not only in CVR, but Lectora, Rehearsal, Micro Builder, all of our products along the road. So Feel free to come back to as many of these as you'd like. There's actually a QR code there on screen that will take you to the recordings of the previous sessions if you're interested in reviewing anything that we've talked about in the past. So, um, any last questions in here? I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A panel, but oh wait, got one. Uh, the train, is there a way to make that? Okay, my client wants to have a 360 video of a train passing by. Is there a way to make that timed? Oh, that's a tough one. Uh, uh, I guess you could film a train passing by would be the easiest. Because the challenge with that one, I think, is the fact that making that train look realistic in a 360 environment when it's not, you'd really have to shoot that in a very specific way to get that to kind of, wrap accordingly, I guess is the best way to explain that. So like, yes, you could set up a timed event to do it. Okay, you are filming it, but I want to control the time it arrives. Oh, oh yeah. Okay, if you're doing that, then um, you can pause the scene at a certain point. Like, it depends on like the rest of the interactivity going into it, like the rest of what's going on. But like in CVR, you can pause the scene and let them kind of interact with other stuff, and then restart that. So that would be how you would control that is maybe pause the scene right at the beginning, go through all the other stuff and use like other methods for triggering different actions other than the timed action option, which is in CVR, and then have it restart. And then you can control that. Okay. To go from a stock video of the environment to a video of the same area with the train. You know, um, hmm. Adi, I may want to talk to you a bit more about this offline. Let's see, there's a suggestion in the chat. You could switch from 360 to linear and back. Like that would be another option as well. Yeah. You could go back and forth between the two types of video. That could definitely work. But I might need a little bit more information on the use case. So I'd be happy to connect with you later to talk about it. So, so uh, any other questions here? We got a couple minutes. If not, I'll give that time back to you, but okay. Well, thanks again. Again, feel free to reach out if you have questions about this going forward. Look for that recording of the session coming in a few days. Should be up, I mean, before the end of the week. You should see that come to you. There'll also be some follow-up blogs to this as well. We actually have a blog that Casey, did we ever get the one about, we have a CVR blog. I'll, that's not something that we talked about today, but just about some functionality that will be coming out as well. So look for those as well. So thank you again and hope to see you in another session soon.